I still remember the sound it made when it hit the floor. Not loud, not dramatic, just a soft thud. The kind of sound that a small, wrapped box makes when someone throws it down like it means nothing. Like I meant nothing, and the worst part, it was my wife who threw it, in front of 60 people, in front of the wedding guests, the waiters, the musicians who had stopped playing, in front of her daughter, the bride who stood there in her white dress, one hand covering her mouth, not in shock. But to hide her smile, I didn't say a word, I didn't cry, I didn't argue, I didn't make a scene. I just stood there for a moment, looked at the box lying on the polished floor of that expensive reception hall, and then I bent down slowly, because my knees aren't what they used to be, picked it up, straightened my tie, and walked out. Nobody stopped me. Nobody called after me. I pushed open the heavy glass door of the reception hall, stepped out into the cool night air, and I just breathed. 30 minutes later, everything changed, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me take you back to where this story really begins. Because to understand what happened that night, you need to understand who I am, who my wife is, and what was inside that box. My name is Harold Eugene Patterson. I am 67 years old. I have rough hands, a bad back, and a smile that my first wife Margaret used to say could light up a dark room. I worked for 38 years as a maintenance supervisor at a textile factory. Not glamorous work. Not the kind of job that makes people say, "Oh, wow," at dinner parties, but it was honest work. I showed up every single day, even through the winters when the pipes froze and the heating was broken, even through the summers when the machines ran so hot that the air itself felt like it was burning. I provided, I protected, I loved. Margaret was my whole world for 22 years. We raised 2 children together, my son, Daniel, and my daughter, Grace. We lived in a modest house in a modest neighborhood. We didn't take expensive vacations. We didn't drive fancy cars. But every Friday night, Margaret would make her pot roast, and the 4 of us would sit around that kitchen table and talk and laugh until the food went cold. Those were the richest years of my life, and I didn't even know it then. Margaret passed away 7 years ago. Breast cancer. It was fast, which the doctors said was a mercy, but there is no such thing as mercy when the person you love most in this world is being taken from you. I held her hand at the end. I told her I loved her. She told me to take care of our children. I promised I would. For 2 years after that, I was just existing, going to work, coming home, eating whatever I could heat up in the microwave. Daniel called every Sunday. Grace visited when she could. But the house was quiet in a way that no amount of television could fix. Then I met Diane. Diane walked into my life at a community center fundraiser. She was laughing at something her friend had said. This big, warm, open laugh. And for the first time since Margaret passed, I felt something stir in my chest. Something that felt almost like hope. She was 54, recently divorced, with a daughter from her first marriage. Her daughter's name was Melissa. She was 28 at the time, living in the city, working in finance. Diane and I dated for a year. She was funny and affectionate, and she made me feel less alone. My kids liked her, or at least they said they did. And when I proposed, down on one knee in the same community center where we'd met, she said yes before I'd even finished the sentence. We got married quietly, just family, a small ceremony at the courthouse, and dinner at a restaurant afterward. That was 3 years ago, and in those 3 years, I learned that some people show you who they really are slowly. Like a photograph developing in a darkroom, one detail at a time, until the full picture is finally clear. Diane's daughter, Melissa, never liked me. She was polite enough in the beginning. Polite the way someone is polite to a waiter, with just enough warmth to be acceptable, but with an underlying message that you are staff and you should know your place. I genuinely tried. I bought Melissa a birthday gift the first year, a beautiful leather-bound journal because Diane had told me her daughter loved writing. Melissa thanked me with a smile that didn't reach her eyes, and I never saw the journal again. I drove 2 hours one Saturday to help Melissa move apartments, carried boxes up 3 flights of stairs until my back screamed, and she barely said thank you. Her boyfriend at the time, a man named Carter, made a comment under his breath to his friend that I overheard. He said, "Diane's old charity case. I didn't say anything. I went home, took 2 aspirin, and told Diane the move had gone fine." But the thing about Melissa was that she had her mother completely wrapped around her finger. Diane worshipped that girl. And whenever I tried to gently suggest that Melissa was perhaps not as warm as she could be, Diane would become defensive in a way that shut down all conversation. "She just needs time," Diane would say. "She's protective of me. Her father hurt her. Just give her space." So I gave her space. I gave her years of space, and it only got worse. Melissa announced her engagement to Carter 8 months ago. I have to be honest with you. I didn't like Carter, not because of any one thing. It was a collection of small things. The way he talked over people at dinner, the way he interrupted Diane to explain things to her that she clearly already knew, the way he looked at his phone when others were speaking. But he made Melissa happy, or at least he made her laugh, and that was enough for Diane. The wedding planning began immediately. Diane threw herself into it. Venues, flowers, caterers, dress fittings. She and Melissa spent weekends in the city shopping. They had a shared Pinterest board. They had spreadsheets. I was not part of any of this, which was fine. I'm not a wedding planning kind of man. But here's what I noticed, slowly, carefully, the way you notice a crack in a wall getting wider over the winter. Diane was changing. She started making comments, small ones at first, about the neighborhood we lived in, about my clothes, about the fact that Carter's father was a surgeon, and Carter's mother had her own interior design firm, and they're very sophisticated people. Harold, very sophisticated. I nodded. I listened. I said nothing. Then one evening, about 2 months before the wedding, Diane sat down across from me at the kitchen table and said, "Harold, I need to talk to you about the wedding gift." I put down my coffee. "I've been thinking," she said, not meeting my eyes, "and I think it would be better if the gift came from me, just from me. You can contribute to it financially, of course, but I think for appearances, for how it looks to Carter's family, it would be better if you want my name off the gift," I said. She looked uncomfortable. "It's not like that." "What is it like, Diane?" "Carter's family is. They're expecting a certain level. I don't want anything to seem. I just want everything to be perfect for Melissa." I looked at my wife for a long moment. This woman I had married. This woman whose hand I held when she cried about her first marriage. This woman I had loved with every bit of a heart that had already been broken once. "What gift were you planning?" I asked quietly. "I found a gorgeous Italian ceramics set, handmade. It's about $2,000. I thought you could. You thought I could pay for a gift that has only your name on it," I said. She flushed. "Harold, please don't make this difficult." I stood up from the table. "I won't be on that gift, Diane, but I'll bring my own." She looked alarmed. "What do you mean, your own? You can't just, people will notice." "Let them notice," I said, and I went to bed. Now here is where I need you to pay close attention, because this is the part of the story that changes everything. The next morning, I drove 40 minutes to a law office downtown. I had called ahead and made an appointment with an attorney I trusted, a man named Gerald Owens, who had handled my affairs for 15 years. A quiet, careful man who wore suspenders and smelled like pipe tobacco. I sat across from Gerald and I said, "I need to put together a gift, a wedding gift, and I need it done correctly and legally." Gerald looked at me over his glasses. What kind of gift are we talking, Harold? The kind that can't be thrown away? I said. We spent 2 hours in that office. Gerald asked questions. I answered them. We reviewed documents together, signed where signatures were needed, made copies, sealed envelopes. When I left Gerald's office, I was carrying a small manila envelope. I went home, found a simple gift box in the closet, one of those small white ones with a ribbon, and I placed the envelope inside. I wrapped it myself, badly, because I have never been good at wrapping, with silver paper from the grocery store. On the tag, I wrote, "To Melissa and Carter, with love, Harold." I put the box on the dresser in the bedroom, and I didn't mention it to Diane. The wedding itself was held at a country estate about an hour outside the city, rented out for the entire weekend. There were white tents on the lawn, flowers everywhere, a string quartet, the works. Melissa looked beautiful, I will say that. Whatever else I might feel, she was a genuinely beautiful bride, the kind that makes the room go quiet when she walks in. Carter looked pleased with himself, which was his natural expression. I wore my best suit, the navy one I'd bought 2 years ago for a cousin's funeral. I'd had it dry, cleaned, and I shone my shoes until I could see my face in them. I looked presentable. Not wealthy, not sophisticated, but presentable and clean. Diane barely looked at me all morning. She was in a whirl of the bride energy, touching up her hair, fussing with her dress, taking approximately 47 photographs with her phone. The ceremony was lovely. The vows were said, the rings were exchanged, tears were cried. I sat in the second row, and I watched, and I clapped when everyone clapped. At the reception, we were seated at a round table near the back. Carter's family occupied the long table of honor at the front. His parents, Dr. and Mrs. Beaumont, were exactly as I'd imagined, perfectly groomed, perfectly posed. The kind of people who have a certain way of looking at you that communicates, without a single word, that they are assessing your worth and finding it wanting. I sat quietly. I ate my salad. I talked to Gerald, the older gentleman sitting beside me, who turned out to be Carter's uncle, and was refreshingly a perfectly normal and interesting man who had spent 30 years as a marine biologist, and then it was time for the gifts. At wealthy weddings, gifts are sometimes opened at the reception. This was one of those weddings. A table had been set up near the dance floor, piled with beautifully wrapped boxes and elegant envelopes, and Melissa and Carter sat in decorated chairs like royalty while guests gathered around. There were gasps and laughter as boxes were opened. Kitchen appliances that cost more than my first car. A weekend stay at a resort in Portugal. Cash gifts in envelopes that Melissa counted discreetly with practiced fingers. Carter's parents gave them the deed to a timeshare in Aspen. Diane's gift, the Italian ceramics set, received genuine applause. Melissa hugged her mother with both arms and said loudly enough for the room to hear, "Mom, this is absolutely stunning. I love it so much." Then a bridesmaid picked up my little box from the table. It was unmistakably mine, the badly wrapped silver paper, the slightly crooked ribbon. The bridesmaid read the tag, and her face did something small and dismissive. "From Harold," she announced. There was a murmur in the crowd, not mean, just indifferent. People were already talking to each other. Melissa took the box. She looked at it. She looked at Carter. Something passed between them, one of those private married couple languages, except they weren't married yet, but they'd already developed the shorthand. She pulled off the ribbon and tore the paper and opened the small white box. Inside was the manila envelope. She took it out, turned it over, looked at the sealed flap with Gerald Owens's office address printed neatly in the corner. "What is this?" she said. Not to me, to her mother. Diane had gone red. I could see it from where I stood. Open it, someone said helpfully from the crowd. Melissa slid her finger under the flap and pulled out the documents. She looked at the first page, then the second. She frowned. She passed it to Carter, who looked at it with the practiced eye of someone who works in finance, and then looked up at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. I don't understand, Melissa said. It's a trust. I said. My voice was calm. Education fund for your future children. It's already funded. A few people near the front nodded appreciatively, but Melissa's face was doing something strange. She looked at her mother, then at Carter, and I could see the calculation happening in real time. An education trust wasn't liquid. It wasn't cash. It wasn't something she could spend on a kitchen renovation or a vacation. How much is in it? Carter asked. That's between Melissa and the attorney. I said quietly, it's her gift, but what is it worth now? Melissa pressed. As a gift, there's no money we can access, is there? It's just locked away for theoretical future children. I met her eyes. Yes, I said simply. Something shifted in the room. I could feel it. Melissa set the documents down on the table. She looked at her mother, and that was when Diane did something that I will never, as long as I live, forget. She picked up the small white box from the table. She looked at me with something cold in her eyes, embarrassment, I think, or anger, or maybe a mix of both. And she said, loud enough for the tables nearest to us to hear, Harold, this is a wedding gift, not a financial instrument. It's worthless as a gift. It's just paper. And she dropped it. Not threw it, exactly. More like she simply opened her fingers and let it fall. But the effect was the same. It hit the floor with that soft thud I told you about. The envelope and its documents slid halfway out of the box. 60 people went quiet. I stood there for a moment. I looked at Diane. I looked at Melissa. I looked at Carter's family at the head table, at Dr. Beaumont, who had the good grace to look uncomfortable. I looked at my gift on the floor, and I said nothing. I bent down, my bad knees protesting, picked up the box, straightened up slowly, and tucked the box under my arm. Then I adjusted my tie, pushed my chair in neatly, and walked toward the door. The string quartet, bless them, seemed to understand and struck up a piece of music just then. Conversation resumed nervously. I heard Diane's voice saying something cheerful and forced behind me. I pushed open the glass door and stepped out into the September night. The country estate had a long gravel driveway that wound through manicured lawns down to the main road. I walked it slowly, the gravel crunching under my shoes. The night air was cool and smelled like autumn, that specific smell of leaves beginning to turn. I didn't feel angry. That surprised me. I had expected to feel anger, or humiliation, or that burning behind the eyes that comes before tears. But what I actually felt was something much quieter, much older. I felt clear, like a bell had been rung somewhere in my chest and everything else had gone still. At the end of the driveway, where the gravel met the road, there was a bus shelter, and sitting on the bench inside the shelter, with a rolled sleeping bag beside him and a paper cup with a few coins in it, was the man. He was roughly my age. He had a gray beard and tired eyes, and he was wearing a coat that had been good once, but was now thin at the elbows. He looked up when he heard my footsteps. We looked at each other for a moment. Evening, he said. Evening, I said back. I looked down at the box in my hands. Then I looked up at this man. I have something here that someone just called worthless. I said, I want to give it to you, but I want to be honest, it's not cash. It's not food. It's a legal document. The man looked at me carefully. What kind of legal document? An education trust, I said, funded and drawn up today, supposed to be a wedding gift. Why are you giving it to a stranger on the street? I thought about that. Because it deserves to go somewhere it's appreciated, I said. He held out his hand. I gave him the box. He opened it, The way you open something when you're not sure what's inside. He took out the envelope and held it up to catch the light from the road. Harold Patterson. He read from the return address. He looked at me. That you? Yes. He opened the envelope and took out the documents. He was slow and careful with them. The way you handle something you understand might be important. He read in silence for a long moment. Then he looked up. His expression had changed. Son, he said, and he called me son, even though we were probably the same age, and somehow that didn't seem strange at all. Do you know what this is? I drew it up this morning. I said, this isn't just an education trust. He said slowly, this is, he looked at the documents again, this is $40,000. Yes, I said. He stared at me. My wife called it worthless. I said, your wife. He stopped. He ran a hand over his face. Son, this is $40,000 sitting in a legal trust. Even if it was locked for children who might not exist for years, this is. I know what it is, I said quietly. He was silent for a moment. Why are you giving this to me? Because you're here, I said simply, and because I believe that the right things find the right people. Now, here is where I need you to stop. Because everything I've told you so far, the wedding, the gift, the humiliation, the man at the bus shelter, it has all been building to this moment. And this moment changes everything. The man at the bus shelter looked at the documents for a long time. Then he reached into the inside pocket of his coat, and he pulled out a worn leather wallet. He opened it and took out a card slightly bent, a little faded, and he held it out to me. I took it. In the light from the road, I read it. Robert J. Callaway, Chairman Emeritus, Callaway Education Foundation. I looked up. He was watching me with quiet eyes. I was a very different man 8 years ago. He said, I ran one of the largest private education foundations in the Northeast, 200 employees, 40 million in annual grants. I said nothing. I lost everything, he said, not to bad luck, to bad decisions, to a drinking problem I spent 20 years pretending I didn't have, to a board who lost patience, to a family that, well, he paused, a family that stepped away. I'm sorry, I said. I've been living rough for 2 years. I was embarrassed, I mean, the kind of embarrassed that makes you not want to be found. Former chairman of a foundation, sleeping in shelters. He looked down at the documents, but I've been sober for 14 months, and I was trying to figure out how to start over, how to do something that meant something again. He held up the documents. You just handed me the seed, he said. I didn't understand him fully, not yet. I said, it's an education trust, not much use to you personally, not for me, he said. Don't you see, I know the education funding world better than almost anyone. I know the foundation's legal structures, the grant pathways. This trust, he held it up, with my knowledge, can be used as the anchor for a new foundation. Not right away, but I have contacts. I have former colleagues who have been waiting for me to get sober, who have told me. He stopped himself. This document, this 40,000, it's not just a gift, it's a beginning. We stood there in the September dark. What's your name? I asked. Robert, he said. Robert, I said. I hope you build something beautiful. He looked at me with those tired, clear eyes. What about you? What are you going to do? I put my hands in my pockets and looked back up the long driveway toward the lights of the reception hall. I'm going to get my car, I said, and I'm going to go home. And tomorrow I'm going to have a very important conversation. With your wife, with my attorney, I said. Robert was quiet for a moment. Then, the 40,000, it's not gone, you know. Legally, you withdrew the designation of beneficiary tonight. The money reverts to you. I stared at him. I may have been out of it for a few years, he said with a small, dry smile, but I still know trust law. I started to laugh. Not a loud laugh. A small, honest one. The kind that comes when the universe does something so perfectly timed that there's nothing else to do. Good night, Robert, I said. Good night, Harold, he said. I gave him my card, An old one from the factory, worn at the corners. Call me, I said, when you're ready to build that foundation. He took it carefully and tucked it in his wallet. I walked up the driveway. I got my car from the valet. I drove home. I sat in my kitchen in the quiet house that used to be quiet in the wrong way, and was now quiet in a different way, a waiting kind of quiet, like before weather changes, and I thought about everything. Then I went to bed, and I slept soundly for the first time in months. Diane came home at 2 in the morning. I heard her car in the driveway, heard the door, heard her come upstairs. She paused outside the bedroom door for a long moment. Then she went to the guest room. In the morning, I was up at 6, the way I always am. Old habit from the factory. I made coffee. I sat at the kitchen table. Diane came downstairs at 8. She was still in her formal clothes, which she'd slept in. Her makeup was smeared and her eyes were red. She stood in the kitchen doorway and looked at me. "Harold," she said. "Good morning," I said. "I owe you." "You do," I said calmly, "but not right now. Sit down, have coffee. We'll talk properly when you've had a chance to change." She blinked. I don't think she'd expected calm. She sat. I poured her coffee. We sat in silence for a few minutes. "People were talking about it after you left," she said finally. Her voice was small. "I imagine so. Carter's father, Dr. Beaumont, he came and asked me what the gift was that you'd brought. He said he'd seen you reading it with someone and he—" She stopped. "What did you tell him?" I asked. I didn't know what to tell him. She admitted. "I didn't know what was in the box." "No," I agreed. "You didn't." She looked at me. "What was in the box, Harold?" "An education trust," I said, "for $40,000, for Melissa and Carter's future children." Diane went very still. $40,000, yes. She put her coffee cup down. Her hands were not steady. "Harold, I drew it up yesterday morning with Gerald Owens," I said. "It was everything I had in my personal savings account, not our joint account, mine." She stared at me. "I was going to give it to your daughter," I said, "because despite everything, she is your daughter, and she was getting married, and I wanted to give something meaningful, something that would last, something that might help a child who doesn't even exist yet have an easier start." Diane put her face in her hands. "But you called it worthless," I said. "In front of 60 people, Harold, I didn't know." "You didn't ask," I said. "You assumed. Because I wore a Navy suit that's 3 years old, and I drove myself here, and I wrapped the box badly. You assumed." She was crying now quietly into her hands. I sat across from her, and I felt something I hadn't expected to feel in that moment. Not satisfaction. Not righteous anger. Something closer to grief. "I love you, Diane," I said. "I have loved you honestly for 3 years. But last night you did something that I have to be honest with you about. You were ashamed of me, not because of anything I did wrong, but because I don't fit the image you wanted to present. And that," my voice caught, just slightly, "that is something I need you to understand I will not live with. Not because of pride, but because Margaret, my first wife, she was proud of me. In 30 years, she was never ashamed of me. Not once. And I know I'm just a maintenance man, and I know I'm not sophisticated, and I know I wrapped that box badly, but I am a good man, and good men deserve—" I stopped. Diane was looking at me through her tears with an expression I'd never seen on her before. "You deserve better than what I gave you last night?" She whispered. "Yes," I said simply. "I do." 3 days after the wedding, Melissa called. I almost didn't answer. "But I did, Harold," she said. Her voice was strange, tight. "Melissa, asterisk, I need to, I want to." She stopped. Started again. "Carter told his father what happened, with your gift, and his father." She stopped again. "What about his father?" I said. "His father told Carter that what I did, what my mother did, was one of the most—" He used the word graceless. I waited. "He said the way I responded to your gift was graceless. And then Carter's mother, She looked up the trust structure because Carter had kept the first page, and she realized what it was. She told Dr. Beaumont and he, Melissa's voice broke. He said what? I asked quietly. He said that the man who walked out of that reception hall was the classiest person in the room, and that we should be deeply ashamed. A long silence. Harold, Melissa said, I am so sorry. I didn't rush to say it was fine, because it wasn't fine, and rushing to say so would be a kindness neither of us deserved. I know you've never really accepted me, I said. As your mother's husband, as part of your family, I know I'm not your father and I've never tried to be, but I have tried to be kind to you. For 3 years I have tried. I know, she said. And last night I tried to give you the biggest gift I had ever given anyone in my life. My savings, my life's work, saved coin by coin over 38 years. I wanted to give it to your future children. She was crying now. I could hear it. Where is the trust now? She asked. Mom said you took it back. I gave it away, I said. You what? On my way out. I gave it to someone at the bus shelter at the end of the driveway. Silence. A stranger, she said. A stranger, I confirmed, who I believe will do something worthwhile with it. Another long silence. Harold, Melissa said. I don't deserve you to forgive me. No, I said. You don't, but I'm going to, Melissa. Not today, not even this week, but eventually, because forgiveness isn't for you, it's for me, and I'm not going to carry this. She was quiet. Tell your mother I love her, I said. Tell her I'm still here and I'm not going anywhere, but tell her things have to change. I will, she said. And Melissa? Yes. Congratulations on your marriage. I genuinely hope you both are happy. She broke down completely then. I listened for a moment, then gently ended the call. 6 months after the wedding, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. Harold, said the voice. It's Robert Calloway. I sat up straight in my chair. Robert, how are you? I'm well, he said. I'm genuinely well. There was something in his voice I hadn't heard the night at the bus shelter. Something bright. I've been wanting to call you for months, but I wanted to wait until I had something real to tell you. What do you have to tell me? I asked. The foundation is back, he said. Not the old one, a new one. The Harold E. Patterson Education Trust. I named it after you. I hope that's all right, Robert. It's real, Harold. I used the trust you gave me as the anchor. I connected with 3 former board members who've been waiting for me to get sober. We filed for nonprofit status 4 months ago. We had our first grant committee meeting 2 weeks ago. I felt something warm rise up in my chest. How much are we talking about? I asked. First year, he paused for emphasis. We've secured commitments for $2.3 million in scholarships. For children who can't afford college, I set down my coffee cup very carefully. Robert, I said, because of a box someone called worthless. He said quietly, because you bent down and picked it up off the floor and gave it to a stranger. Harold, you didn't give me $40,000. You gave me my life back. And now we're going to give hundreds of kids a chance they wouldn't have had. I couldn't speak for a moment. Will you come to our opening ceremony? He asked. I want to tell people the story. Yes, I said. Yes, I will. I told Diane that evening. She sat at the kitchen table, the same kitchen table where so many of our most important conversations had happened, and she listened. She listened to the whole story. Robert, the foundation, the $2.3 million in scholarships, the children who would go to college because of $40,000 that she had called worthless and dropped on a reception hall floor. When I finished, the kitchen was very quiet. Harold, she said, her voice was barely above a whisper. I'm not telling you to make you feel bad, I said. I'm telling you because it's true and you deserve to know the truth. I threw away $2 million in scholarships, she said, when I dropped that box. No, I said. You threw away a piece of paper. What it became was never up to you. She looked at me, but it could have been Melissa's name on that foundation. I said quietly, if she'd been the one to receive it and honor it. Her children's name, her legacy. Diane sat with that. What do I need to do, she said finally, to make this right? To make us right. I reached across the table and I took her hand. Be proud of me. I said, that's all. Just be proud of the man I am. She squeezed my hand. She was crying, the kind of crying that is embarrassing and ugly and completely honest. I am proud of you, she said. I have always been proud of you. I was afraid of what people would think. I was a coward. Yes, I said. You were. And I'm sorry. I know. I said. We sat at the kitchen table until the coffee went cold, and then I heated it back up, and we sat some more, and slowly. The way old wounds slowly begin to heal, things between us started to breathe again. The opening ceremony of the Harold E. Patterson Education Trust Foundation was held on a Thursday in April in a rented conference room at a hotel downtown. It wasn't glamorous. There were folding chairs and a podium and a banner that had been printed at a copy shop. But the room was full. Former board members, community leaders, a journalist from the regional paper, and in the front row, me, Diane, Melissa, Carter, my son Daniel, who had driven 4 hours to be there, and my daughter Grace, who had flown in. From Portland, Robert stood at the podium, thin and clean, shaven now, wearing a suit that fit him properly, and he told the story. He told it from the beginning, who he'd been, what he'd lost. Night at the bus shelter, the man in the Navy suit who'd bent down and picked a box up off the ground. He didn't spare the details. He told them what Diane had said. He told them that a wedding guest had called $40,000 worthless. There was a murmur in the room. Robert held up a hand. But here's what I want you to understand, he said. That man did not leave that reception hall angry. He left it with Grace. He walked down a dark driveway alone, and he gave away $40,000 to a stranger because he believed in something. He believed that good things don't stop being good just because someone fails to see their value. He looked at me. I have been to a lot of ceremonies in my life, Robert said, a lot of fancy rooms and expensive dinners and fundraisers with open bars. And I have never been in the presence of a more genuinely wealthy man than Harold Patterson. The room applauded. Beside me, Diane was crying. Melissa had her hand over her mouth. Carter was looking at the floor, but not in shame, in something more like wonder. My son Daniel leaned over and put his hand on my shoulder. He didn't say anything. He didn't have to. My daughter Grace took my hand. I sat in that folding chair in that unremarkable room, and I felt, for the first time since Margaret passed, for the first time in years, completely, wholly, peacefully myself. Not a charity case, not an afterthought, not a man in an old suit who wrapped things badly, just Harold Eugene Patterson, 67 years old, rough hands, bad back, the kind of smile that, once upon a time, a woman told me could light up a dark room. She was right. If you take nothing else from this story, take this. The worth of a gift is not in its wrapping. The worth of a person is not in their clothing. The worth of kindness is not determined by the people who receive it. It is determined by the spirit in which it is given. I gave $40,000 to a stranger, and it became $2.3 million in scholarships for children who had nothing. Not because I am special, not because I am wise, but because I refuse to let humiliation make me bitter. I refuse to let shame make me small. I picked up what was thrown down. I walked out with my head high, and I placed my gift where it was ready to grow. The people who mocked me that night, they carry the weight of that moment still, not because I put it on them, because guilt has its own gravity. You cannot throw away a man's best gift, call it worthless in front of 60 people, and then learn $2 million from it and not feel that in your bones for the rest of your life. Diane and I are still married. We are working at it, the way marriages require working. It is not always easy, but she has never, since that night, been ashamed of me, and that is enough. That is more than enough. Melissa and I are healing, slowly, the way trust, once broken, has to be rebuilt one small stone at a time. And Robert is running one of the most promising new education foundations in the region. He calls me every Sunday. We have become, improbably and perfectly, friends. The homeless man at the bus shelter became the foundation chairman. The gift called worthless built a legacy. And the quiet man who said nothing, he was the most powerful person in the room all along. If this story touched your heart, if it reminded you of someone you know, a quiet, humble person who deserved better and gave more than anyone realized, please hit that subscribe button and share this with someone who needs to hear it today. Because sometimes the stories that matter most are the ones about the people who say the least.